There are 10 times more bacterial cells than human cells living inside of us right now. And cells are the tiny Lego-like building blocks that build up our bodies. But all this bacteria is actually not a bad thing. These friendly bacteria help us to digest our food and, most importantly, fight off disease. So for my research, I study these good bacteria and the ways in which they naturally prevent infection. Just like us, bacteria like to chat, but they can't use words or body language. Instead, they have to use chemicals. These chemicals can be used to fight off bad bugs or even to attract their friends. All right, hello everyone, and thank you for coming to my talk today. Just going to share my screen quickly here for the introduction. All right, so hopefully you've all chosen to talk today because you're interested in why Michelle Obama and Kim Kardashian are actually more bacteria than they are human. And you may also be wondering why I chose these two celebrities in particular for my introduction today. And like any good, when I was putting together my talk for today, I just decided to Google who the most popular celebrities were and to do my research. And it turned out that the two most popular celebrities are Michelle Obama and Kim Kardashian. But whether you're a celebrity, a scientist, you or me, our bodies are absolutely full of microbes. They're found in our gut, in our mouth, on our skin, and all throughout the human body. Active community of microbes is referred to as the microbiome. But I like to refer to it as forest that lives inside of our bodies because this community is actually the most microbially dense community on Earth out of all other ecosystems. But what you might be wondering is, if there's so much bacteria living in our body, isn't that a bad thing? Don't bacteria make us sick? Why aren't we sick all the time? And to that, I would say that's an awesome question. But what scientists have actually come to realize of microbes is super important to our health. Whether you're Kim Kardashian or you or me, all of us rely on these microbes to help us digest our food, produce different vitamins, regulate our immune system, and even help to moderate our mental health. And so, where do all of these microbes come from? Do we need to take them in some sort of supplement? Is there a specific way we get them? Well, the good news is these microbes through almost everything that we do. Every time you jump in a lake, take a breath of fresh air, talk to your family or friends or just eat food, you're actually consuming a lot of that make up our microbiome, that rainforest of us. So this is where our comes into the discussion. I'll stop screen sharing here for a moment. So I wanted everyone to bring their, and I brought two, if everyone can see them, because one of the main ways we get microbes is through our food. So what I'm wondering is if everyone can turn to their yogurt containers and look at the ingredients list and see, do you see active bacterial culture? Maybe you just see bacterial culture. And specifically, does anyone see any bacteria names? So it might be something like lactobacillus or bifidobacteria. And those are just specific types of bacteria that might be found in your dairy. So the general term for these bacteria that you find in yogurt that you might have heard of before with brands like Activia is a probiotic. And that means these good bacteria that you're getting through your food that help to make up that microbiome. And that's because bacteria is actually used to make a lot of different dairy products. Everything from yogurt to cheese to kefir are all made with these bacteria that when we eat also help us gut and this internal microbiome. But then the question becomes, if this bacteria is so good for us, what happens when it's gone? If we kill off this good bacteria or it can't live in our body for some reason. And a great example of this is if anyone has ever taken antibiotics and maybe had some sort of side effect. You might have had an upset stomach, you might have had a yeast infection, you might have had a skin rash. When I was in undergrad, I got strep throat and was prescribed antibiotics as you would normally take. And then what happened is I got an infection on my tongue. But I didn't know that that was possible. So I thought I was having an allergic reaction and rushed to the hospital thinking that I was going into anaphylaxis. And when I got there, the doctor informed me that I was actually having a super common side effect to antibiotics, which is a fungal infection. And it's called oral thrush, and you can get it on your tongue after taking antibiotics. And basically the reason that happens is when I took those antibiotics, it killed the good bacteria that were living in my mouth and helping to fend off that fungus from causing a fungal infection on my tongue. So I took an antifungal and was able to treat that infection. But that brings me to basically what I study in my PhD. I study these good bacteria that live in our body and the ways in which they can actually naturally prevent infections in our body. And what I'm interested in them preventing is something called opportunistic pathogens. That's basically just a fancy term for members of the biome that are already living in our body where they're not really causing any harm until something happens, like you take antibiotics or you affect your immune system in some way. And then all of a sudden, these microbes can kind of take advantage of that situation and end up causing diseases. Things like yeast infections, diaper rash, in my case, oral thrush, all of these kind of secondary infections that can happen after you take antibiotics. So an analogy of this that I like to use is a schoolyard bully. When you're a kid and you're out on the schoolyard, if there's a teacher that's closely watching all the kids, that bully's going to be on their best behavior and probably not trying to cause any trouble. But as soon as the teacher turns their back or moves to a different area of the playground, that gives the bully an opportunity for throwing snowballs or picking on different kids. And that's exactly what opportunistic pathogens do. Normally, when we're happy and we're healthy, they're just living in our body, not causing any harm. But as soon as you take antibiotics, or maybe you have a cold or your immune system's affected in some way, they can take advantage of that situation and then cause an additional infection that you have to deal with. So in my case, the particular opportunistic pathogens that I'm interested in are fungi, which you can see here on my earrings. When I hear the word fungi, and maybe when you guys hear the word fungi, I think of mushrooms, the type of mushrooms you might find on your pizza, in the grocery store, maybe out on a walk in the forest. But fungi, just like plants, are actually this huge, diverse community of life that are full of all kinds of different organisms. Everything from the giant mushrooms you might find growing on a tree to tiny microscopic fungi that we can't even see with our eyes. Some of those microscopic fungi can cause diseases like yeast infections and diaper rash, but other microscopic fungi are actually super useful, and you guys might have some experience with them. A classic example is baker's yeast, which you can buy at the grocery store, and that's what we use to make bread, beer, wine, and all kinds of fermented foods like soy sauce. Other microscopic fungi are also used to make a variety of different products, including ingredients that ultimately go into the making of Lego. So fungi are this amazing group of organisms that, although they can cause disease, also provide a lot of benefits to humanity. And so as a scientist that study fungi, I try to understand both how their biology actually works and the ways in which we can take advantage of fungi, but also how we can find better ways to kill them and to treat human infections with fungi. So now I want us to try a little bit of an exercise here, because when I'm looking at these interactions between good bacteria and fungi, I can't just kind of listen in on their conversations and figure out what's going on. Even under a microscope, it can be pretty complicated to figure out how these different microbes are communicating. They can't use words, they can't use body language. So, how in the world are they interacting? Says sending some sort of signal. Exactly. Without words, they have to find really specific and unique ways to communicate. And since these are microscopic organisms that we can't see with our eyes, they have to be really unique in the ways that they communicate. So they actually use basically a whole suite of different chemicals to communicate, where they can basically attract their friends, they can fend off their enemies, they can affect our bodies and each other. And so in my PhD work, I try to study these chemicals to see if they might be able to be new ways to treat these infections. So I'm going to share my screen again here. And I want us to try a little, if possible, where if everyone can and try to text a friend or even yourself just as an exercise using emoji. Try to make the sentence, I'm listening to a cool science talk right now. Just emojis, see if you can communicate that. So hopefully as you're doing that, you might realize it's a little bit tough. There's a lot of different combinations of emojis used to kind of get this about, listening to something interesting or cool, and that ultimately it's about science. And I like to use this example because bacteria need to be really specific. If they have to be misinterpreted, it could result in the loss of their habitat. They might die. They might not communicate properly with the other microbes. Through evolution, they've had to come up with these really specific signals to directly communicate exactly what they want the microbes in their environment to understand. So ultimately, in my PhD, what I've discovered is a set of chemicals that are made by the bacteria that you find in household yogurt. And these chemicals can actually be used to treat fungal infections. And so hopefully in the future and in the rest of my PhD, I'm hoping to continue to study these good bacteria, the friendly bacteria living in our body, to see if we can find new ways to treat fungal infections, both the mucosal ones that you get, in your mouth or as yeast infections, but also more dangerous and deadly fungal infections that affect people living with HIV/AIDS or who are otherwise lacking in an immune system. And so hopefully what you can take away from my talk today is that microbes are really cool and exist in these diverse communities that we can actually try to study in order to find better ways to treat a lot of the infections that we deal with every single day. So with that, I want to thank you guys all for sticking around and listening to my presentation. And I would love to answer any of your questions related to fungi, bacteria, the microbiome, these opportunistic pathogens, or anything else that I've talked about today. Yeah, so unfortunately now many yogurt companies have proprietary information around the mixtures of bacteria they use. So it's kind of kept under lock and key. But definitely if you're looking to kind of boost your microbiome, consumption of dairy in general can be a great way to get more probiotics in your life. So yeah, you'd be looking for active bacterial culture, but the process of making yogurt requires bacteria. So any yogurt that you purchase should have that. But different types of dairy products will have more microbial diversity than others. So, for example, kefir, which is kind of like a yogurt drink, it's known to have a more diverse community of microbes than some of the other yogurts. So often doctors will recommend that people have either kefir or yogurt after a course of antibiotics. Of course, yes. Mine is a pretty common one, but it's still my favorite, and it's called a puffball. And exactly as the name implies, it can be anywhere in size from, like an Oreo up to a soccer ball or bigger. And there are these really big, white-looking mushrooms you can find all throughout Canada. Yeah, and someone put they're delicious, which is another reason that I love them. They're edible and very, very tasty. And what's cool is puffballs and other similar mushrooms release their spores, which are kind of like their seeds, by having them be emitted through like a cloud, a puff, and through either poking them or through rain falling on them. And it's really cool. You can watch it in YouTube videos, or if you're lucky, out in the wild. No, I have not. In terms of my daily use of fungi, I've tried making bread and making their own yogurt, but I haven't advanced yet to making my own yogurt. I think that would be a very activity, something I should maybe take a stab at. Excellent question. So, if you have heard of fiber or other, healthy things we find in different vegetables and bread and things, basically bacteria eat the things that our bodies can't. So a lot of that indigestible parts of plants or fiber that's in bread and plants, bacteria can actually break down those molecules and different components, and that's what they eat and consume. And that's part of the reason they're so important in our gut, because they can get nutrients from food that our body normally couldn't. And that helps us make a lot of the different vitamins that we need to survive. So when you're getting vitamins from things like kale or other leaf, part of that is because bacteria are actually digesting their components and then ultimately making the vitamin that we need. Yeah, for sure. So what they all something that we can't digest, and like most life forms, that usually gets turned into glucose or some sort of sugar component at the end of the day, and then that's what they ultimately use for their energy. But because their bacteria becomes more and more dense as we go down our digestive tract, near the end of the digestive tract digest, that's where the bacteria thrive, because they have all the things they need to survive, and our body's kind of done getting all the easy out of it, the water and the glucose and the protein and the things that we need. Yeah, this is a great question. So definitely kefir, if you've ever heard of that. That's it's kind of like a yogurt beverage that you drink. It's really high in probiotics. And then otherwise anything that's fermented. So sauerkraut, kombucha, anything that is fermented that's a soy product like soy sauce. A lot of those are full of probiotics. But really the best way to get probiotics, if you can, is to have a vegetable garden and then not wash your produce. So you don't want to. You always want to wash produce you get at the grocery store, because there's residuals of chemicals and pesticides. But if you have a home garden, one of the best ways to get probiotics is to eat dirt. Unfortunately, I probably shouldn't endorse that too much, because obviously you can get sick if you eat a lot of dirt. But a little bit of dirt is good for us. That's where we get a lot of the good probiotics that we need. So probiotics are actual organisms, so bacteria that you consume and live in our body, whereas prebiotics are considered things that those bacteria will eat. So it's something that our body can't digest, but the bacteria can, and it's thought to be a way to kind of foster and support that community by giving them exactly what they need to consume. But I greens and grains and all that good stuff, they should have everything they need to survive.